Well, thanks for joining me, Chris. Welcome. What is Lexverify? Can you bring it to life?
Yeah, absolutely. I will start with our mission. So why do we exist? So our mission is to make risk prevention on electronic communications as easy as spell checking. So when you type something in an email, for example, if you misspell a word, it gets flagged up. You click on it, resolve it immediately. It's very easy, right? So while we're looking to harness that behavior we all got so used to over the past couple of decades, to embed a new capability, which is risk prevention. So we won't check for your grammar when you type something in an email or message, but we will check if you're potentially breaching a law, a regulation, company policy, if you're creating a cyber risk, and so on. And to give you a few examples, think about things that people say they might be breaching things like competition law. Are you potentially fixing prices competitors and you're typing that in an email? No one will tell you about it, but we will do because we're leveraging AI to scan electronic communication in real time and to flag those risks before we hit the send button. And the whole point of it is we can prevent the preventable. We can provide that critical real-time training beyond, maybe a staff handbook, which is what most employees I think get
Yes.
nowadays, or maybe annual training if you're lucky. Right? But also thinking about the legal risk and compliance cyber teams who are constantly firefighting. We are providing them with a dashboard so they can see their compliance posture in real time. They can look at what's going on. They can see trends. They can
The risk
intervene.
exposure.
The risk exposure, exactly. They can see what's going on and assess that in real time.
What does it feel like for the employee if they feel like they're being monitored a bit more? Like, what do they? If you got that dashboard, what's that relationship like?
I'm so glad you've asked that question. It's something I've done from the get-go. So I'm a social scientist by background, so I put a lot of thinking into human behavior, looking at the research. And one of the studies I've come across, I think it was a survey by Accenture over in the US, and it was about data collection on employees generally, monitoring and so on. And it said that as you'd expect, generally people don't want to be monitored at work. They don't. There's a big big brother sentiment, which is understandable. But there's an interesting aspect, and so 92% of them said they don't mind having data collected on them as long as there's a well-being or performance aspect to it. So I thought, right, that's that was my light bulb moment. We need to create a true assistant and a co-pilot, if you want. Co-pilot is the
A
buzzword
Microsoft term,
nowadays.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
So we created something that doesn't spy on people, doesn't tell your boss if you're doing something wrong. So generally, is there to support you, and the decision is down to you whether you want to accept the risk, whether you want to go ahead with something, or whether you want to reach your compliance team to ask, hey, is it okay if I go ahead with this? So it actually empowers and augments the end user and the employee rather than being that
Yeah,
monitoring machine.
Big Brother, not.
Yeah. No. So we build this in a way that is ethical by design, but also private and secure by design. Because ethics features a lot more in the whole AI narrative. So we knew we had to look at it from the get-go and design everything we do around that. So every decision we make, every new features we build, we take ethics, privacy, and security into consideration.
So loads to go out there. Where are you at in your startup journey then?
So we started in December 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago. But really, things started to pick up from about the beginning of last year, so January 2023. We got accepted onto a few programs, including NCSE for startups. So that's kind of expanded our focus into cyber as a vertical of products to look at. And then we started to fundraise properly. We just closed our seed round before Christmas last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was led by Midvan and a few other key angel investors and Raspberry Ventures. And we've launched our first product last year as well, acquired our first customer, launched our second product for Microsoft Teams earlier this year. So things are really, really busy at the moment. It's kind of been that kind of journey where it starts quiet. You kind of try to find your feet. We did a lot of R&D, so we spent about 1.5 years just doing R&D, building the models, the data sets, and so on. And now it's really starting to take off. We received a few awards, been through a few accelerators, and we're ready. We're ready to take off.
And you've mentioned a few things just within that have indicated that your journey hasn't been a solo endeavor. And in this series, we're really interested in where partnerships and externals have come into supporting that journey. What kind of partnerships have you been involved in?
I think it depends on how you define a partner, because people might think a partner is someone who's commercially supporting you, but a partner can literally be anyone. I think one of the first most important partners are your investors. Right? So what we've done, our first investors have got to be our directors, our advisory board members, our best supporters from the get-go. So it kind of, if you track your journey as a startup, you'll get to identify that you are actually surrounded by partners, and everyone who's with you from the beginning tends to support you along the journey. So I don't think we can talk about one partner or one partnership, but about an ecosystem, if you want, of partners. Because I think it does take an ecosystem to build a startup. So it's looking across that and seeing who's been with you along the journey.
So then let's unpick your
Yeah.
ecosystem a little bit more. Which ones sort of stand out, or have they changed as you said you got your directors at the beginning there, and the nature of those that's gone on? What can you describe your ecosystem a little bit and perhaps bring one an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started with the first investors. One of our first investors, now our non-executive chairman. We've got a former chief information officer as one of our non-execs as well. So it's kind of started to snowball, kind of find a person, they introduce you to someone else, and then the ball just gets rolling and you meet new people. And that's how you kind of start to build your ecosystem. But from investors, you then go on to your early customers who might think if you build that relationship very, very well, they can become fantastic partners because
So you think of them as partners
yes,
because
yeah,
of the stage that you were at
absolutely.
with a new product.
Absolutely.
So not a sale straight off.
No, not really, because I think you can get so much more by treating your early customers as partners. It's about learning from each other and with each other and growing with each other. So you got some fantastic customers who've been with us from the get-go, and you always think about the relationship, right? They might be getting a discount initially, so they get a bit of value from that, but also get to work with you to build a product, and that's what we've done. We've kind of worked very, very closely with them. Every kind of product update we've done in the past 8 to 10 months has been with the customer feedback in mind and working with them. So they're much more than, a commercial sale. And I think it's very important to look at your strategic customers that way.
Does it become a challenge then changing that relationship possibly as you grow? Those that have been there with your journey, how do you pivot, or do you think they'll stay as partners, or that commercial relationship, how it might evolve?
I think your early customers are always going to be special. They're the ones who said, yes, I want to help you from the get-go. So they'll always, be special in that sense. That's not to say that our other customers, aren't special. But I think as you scale, you can put more processes in place. It maybe becomes a bit more formalized. But you always want to keep that relationship with, with the key ones. And there might be others along the journey who, might not just be your customers. There might be strategic partners as well. I'm thinking here about, maybe consultancy companies or, law firms who might naturally be interested in what we're building, for example, right? So it's an evolution. You can't predict what's going to happen, but I think that some of your stakeholders will always be your key partners.
So you said earlier on that you've been successful with your first raise, and the investors, you see them as a partnership. How does that make a difference, basically, again, in that transactional relationship that it might be?
So as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for investors who can add value beyond the capital. And hey, we are on this podcast, right? So pun intended.
A different kind of capital.
Yes. But you're always looking for, what can you leverage beyond the money that they're going to give you. And we've been super fortunate to have exactly those investors on board. So Midvan is a really great partner. They're based in the Midlands. Their interest is to support local economic development and regional development, and so it's within their interest to support us. And so we've already kickstarted a few initiatives to look at how can we grow Lexverify in the region and beyond. And then some of our other investors, I mean, we've got a really good mix, people who used to work in cybersecurity, exit entrepreneurs, and so on. So each of them will bring on board some, kind of value beyond the money they're going to give you, whether that's, opening doors in a specific vertical, introducing you to other people, highlighting, potential partnership opportunities. That's what you can get from, from them. And we want to build a close relationship with everyone, be transparent with them, and kind of have them join us along the journey. I think that's the best thing you can do with investors.
And where does place fit into that? Because you mentioned there that you've got a local investor, Midvan, but that's not always the case. And I know that originally you didn't start in Birmingham. So how did you think about where to build out? And when you talk about that ecosystem, that's a very geographical word in many ways. It's the relationships, but also place within that.
I think place is really important because what we're looking for is that place has got a critical mass of talent, opportunity, ambition. I think if you look at the West Midlands altogether as a region, it's really globally ambitious. And kind of thought, right, we could go to London, but London's already highly advanced. Why can't we show that you can build a company and a startup outside of London as well? You've known me for a while. I'm a massive fan of place-based development and demonstrate that we can level up other places and so on. So we picked Birmingham because it was that kind of up and coming place. I mean, it is the second biggest city in the UK. It's got a massive amount of talent and ambition going. So I thought, why not showing that we can do it out of London as well? I think sometimes you can think, right, we're going to London. It's not going to be easy. It's never a walk in the park.
I was going to say, someone could say you were making it harder for yourself as if it wasn't hard enough.
But this is what I think what suits what we're trying to achieve. It felt the right opportunity for us, and I think the whole region is getting behind it. Whereas in London, I think sometimes you can get lost between the initiatives. It's like everyone's kind of trying to go there because it's a place to be. But let's not ignore the other places because they've got fantastic things going on. And I think with Birmingham being a post-industrial place, it's trying to continuously revive itself and to kind of use and leverage that history and that industrial narrative is super exciting.
And you mentioned some programs that you'd taken part in, and accelerated incubators, they're a whole industry in themselves sometimes. What have been the benefits of joining that? Has it been positive for you?
I don't think we'd be here today without them. That's genuine. So we started with Microsoft for Startups, and the support available through that has been absolutely fantastic. Beyond the cloud credits that you get, it's all the other opportunities you can tap into. Look at the whole ecosystem that Microsoft has created and so on. The LawTech Sandbox run by LawTech UK, which was really looking at the legal sector and getting a bit more of an insight into general counsels, law firms, and so on. And then NCSC for Startups was absolutely fantastic because, again, it expanded our opportunity into looking at kind of cyber issues. Everything has got to do with electronic communications nowadays. So how do we leverage what we built and those capabilities for the cyber arena? And I think if you're careful and choose these incubators and accelerators strategically, don't just go on one because you think it's a good idea, but really handpick them and commit to them. This is really important because you get what you put in. They can be absolutely transformational. And as I said, we wouldn't be here today without them. I think there's been many, but companies like Supertech, what you're doing here in the Midlands is absolutely phenomenal. All the opportunities you're opening up in the ProfTech system and kind of joining the dots is really, you're a true partner of the ecosystem and you're helping grow this sector. And organizations like Plexel as well, I think hands down they provide the best support if you've got anything to do with cyber at the national level.
Was that about the expertise, or was it almost as another gateway to more partners?
It's another gateway to more partners because they run a series of support programs, and you've got to identify the ones that are really relevant to you. So some of them might be a bit more about founder development. So NCSC for Startups was like that, focused very much on the founder, building the founding team, acquiring skills, knowledge, expertise, and identifying the direction of travel, basically. And then connecting you with stakeholders. But then Cyber Runway Scale, for example, was more about how do we plug you into the wider ecosystem? How do we help you scale? Can we put in touch with some experts that may be looking at things like leadership development or commercialization, partnerships, scaling up, and so on. And by the way, here are some partners that want to speak with you and so on. So it's really being aware of the stage of a journey and how
it's like a network of networks.
Yes, because I think that collaboration is really the key here if we're talking about partnerships. And just yesterday I was at the West Midlands Tech Review, and one of the key messages was we need ruthless collaboration in the region, and I think that's very well put. You can't achieve anything without that ruthless collaboration, so that's what we need more of, and that's that's what some of these programs are enabling. They're doing very well.
I mean, there's just so much. It must take its toll on you also as a founder. The startup journey, as we said already, is never straightforward. Yeah. To what extent do the partners come in and the relationships within that to help just, Chris on a day-to-day?
As I mentioned, anyone can be a partner, right? So my co-founder has been, a really good, support pillar. We, wouldn't have gotten here without maybe, spending some of those evenings together and kind of talking about strategy. But beyond that, when things won't always go well, that's a reality in a startup, and you have ups and downs. It's a roller coaster, as they say. It genuinely is. So it's important to have people around you who can understand that. You can kind of offload things. You can take the pressure off your chest and talk to. And beyond that, our advisory board has been absolutely fantastic. We've got people with phenomenal experience who've been there, done that, exited companies, supported others. And so very often you go to them and say, hey, this has happened. What would you do? Or I've done this. It didn't go very well. What would you have done instead? And you learn from that. I think having that network of support of experienced people is so important. Many don't realize, but draw on those people that are there to support you. Again, beyond just providing you maybe with capital, they're there to cheer for you and support you in the the best and less good of times, put it this way.
Brilliant. I'm just going to do the last one, which is about future looking. So it's all going quite well. Customers, investors growing. What's ahead?
So we've got some very ambitious plans. What the seed round that we've just raised has enabled us to do is to, I think from a personal perspective, go from chief everything officer to trying to understand what does a CEO do and what does that role look for me going forward. So it's enabled me to focus a bit more on the sales, strategic side, business development, growing, scaling, hiring, and so on. So we kind of went from basically 2 people working actively to a team of 11 people working on the product.
It's a big increase.
It's a massive increase. It's the role
New
is
problems.
but also exciting challenges, I would say. It depends on how you look at it. But all of a sudden, you're no longer part of a small team. You've got to hire and manage new people and to allow them to grow and thrive and prosper within the culture we're trying to build in the company. So that's super exciting. But we've also got some very ambitious revenue targets. So we're going from pilots, early stage, initial revenue to how do we grow this into a multi-million-pound company, which requires more structure, more planning, more processes, more formalization. So we're going from that maybe, we can do anything whenever we want to. We got to do some standards. We got some processes in place. We can't just do things whenever we want. But how do we still, maintain that agility? So that's kind of one side of it, the revenue side. But we're also exploring some international markets at the moment, which is super exciting because we've realized that there are many opportunities beyond the UK. And we know the UK government is really keen to incentivize startups to export globally. So we've looked at more traditional markets like the US, Canada, and so on, but also some of the ones maybe where you wouldn't think immediately to go to. So places across Middle East as well, where we've seen very, very kind of high appetite for new solutions as well. So very, very exciting times.
Well, there's lots ahead. Well,
Yeah.
it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining me here.
Likewise, thank you for having me.